All right. Hello, everyone. This is Carter, and today I'm going to be talking about enterprise value and equity value. I hope you all enjoyed my video yesterday on multiples. Unfortunately, the audio wasn't too great for that video. I guess, Lenovo ThinkPad, not great audio, apparently. Unfortunate, but today I'm recording the audio on my phone, so it should be better. But anyway, enterprise value and equity value. Let's get going. So some definitions of enterprise value. The first principles definition is that enterprise value is the present value of a firm's future free cash flows. Some other variations that basically mean the same thing is that enterprise value is the market indicated value of a business's operating assets. Operating assets produce cash flows. So you can see how these are basically the same. And then also intrinsic value, just when you hear people say, like Warren Buffett saying intrinsic value, he really just means the present value of a firm's future free cash flows. Anyway, we're also going to be looking at this formula a lot. Enterprise value equals market value of equity plus market value of debt minus cash. This formula is very important. So equity value, the value of everything a company has that belongs to equity holders. Typically, this is just market cap, so shares outstanding times share price. All right, so simple example. Once again, the formula, enterprise value equals equity value plus market value of debt minus cash. So why are we subtracting cash? This doesn't really intuitively make sense, right? You would think business gets cash, that should increase its value. From this formula, it looks like it's decreasing value. So how does that make sense? Well, let's look at an example. So wallet example. Let's say there's a wallet I want to buy. Let's say there's a wallet at a thrift store that's selling for $25. And let's say they're giving up this wallet, and this wallet has $5 of cash already inside of it when you buy it. So what is the actual intrinsic value of just this individual wallet? And I realize a wallet isn't exactly like a business because a business has future free cash flows. But for the sake of talking about intrinsic value, we're going to use this wallet example. So, like I said, people are willing to pay $25 for this wallet with $5 of cash inside of it. This means that the intrinsic value of this wallet is effectively $20. If the wallet had $25 of cash inside of it, and it was selling for $25, that would effectively mean the wallet has zero intrinsic value. So I hope you can see what I mean there. So the key here is that when we look at valuing a business's intrinsic value, we only care about the future free cash flows that this business produces. So like I said here, if a business just all of a sudden finds cash on the streets, this isn't actually going to change its enterprise value because the business's future free cash flows are not affected. However, this is not the same as for equity value. An equity holder derives value from any kind of cash. So if a business has more cash, there's cash in his wallet, that actually does increase equity value. I'm going to touch on that more later. Anyway, so debt. EV equals equity value plus market value of debt minus cash. I'm going to keep coming back to this formula. So similar to cash, why does having debt add value to the business? That doesn't really make sense. I thought debt's bad. Well, debt isn't always bad, but I'll get into this. So the short answer is debt doesn't add value, even though it looks like that in the equation. So I'm going to talk about capital stack here to help you all better understand this concept. So debt holders fundamentally have first claim on a company's cash flows. So they incur less risk and they have less reward as a result. Conversely, equity holders are the residual claimants, meaning that they only derive value from an investment after debt holders are paid. So taking on more risk because they have to wait for debt holders to get paid, but they have more reward from this investment. So let's look at an example. So company A has $500 worth of debt trading at par. So market value is the same as book value. And it has a market cap of 500. So what is the enterprise value of company A, assuming it has no cash? So we can use the formula. The EV of company A equals 500 plus 500 plus 0. So that equals 1,000. Now we're going to look at this great little scenario. So here's a little picture of the capital stack. As you can see here at the bottom, senior debt, this is the most safe investment, first to get paid out in cash. You're taking on little risk, little reward. At the top is common equity. This is high risk, high reward. So we're going to look at an analogy here using this building. So let's say there's a skyscraper and it's in a hurricane-prone area that can also magically add floors. And let's say this skyscraper represents our business's value. The more value that our business is worth, the more floors on our skyscraper. And the same, less value the business is worth, the less floors. So let's say, back to the same example, 500 of debt, 500 of equity, so it's worth $1,000. In this business, this building has 10 floors, so each floor is worth $100. So debt holders live on the top 5 floors because this is a hurricane prone area. Debt holders don't want to be at the bottom because if there's a flood, the people on the bottom floors are going to be the first to get flooded. This isn't great. So debt holders, since they incur the least amount of risk, they're going to want to be at the top. On the other hand, equity holders, they're going to live on the bottom 5 floors. So they are at more risk for the flood. But why is this fair to equity holders? Why would equity holders agree to this agreement? Well, more risk, more reward. If floors are added to the skyscraper, which in this analogy means that the business appreciates in value, the future free cash flows increase, those the appreciation of the business, that belongs to equity holders. So let's look at this example. Things go well for the business. Let's say the business now has an enterprise value of its future free cash flows of $1,500. This means there are now 15 floors on this skyscraper. So that means that now the equity holders own the bottom 10 floors. They still own the bottom floors because they're taking on the most risk, but they own more of it now. They have doubled their investment. They went from 500 to 1,000 or 5 floors to 10 floors. And also debt holders, they still own the top 5 floors. Market value of debt's $500. So EV here equals 1,000 plus 500, 1,500, 15 floors. This makes sense. But on the other hand, things can go poorly. It's not always great to be owning equity because they're the residual claimant as a result of capital stack. If a business starts to lose value, equity holders are going to take that hit first. So if we look here, the business isn't doing well. The present value of free cash flow is now 600, so 6 floors. The equity holders now only have 1 floor left. All their other 4 floors have been flooded. This is very unfortunate. The debt holders, though, they still own the top 5 floors. So unless all the equity holders get wiped out, debt holders can sleep well at night knowing that they're secure. It's kind of like on the Titanic. You have first class at the top, second class in the middle, third class at the bottom. Not going to get into that's fair or not. This isn't liberal arts class, but that's kind of classes. Anyway, though, like my boy Jack, he's third class. He ended up not living because he's on the bottom. Titanic, hits an iceberg, starts to incur losses. He's done for. Very unfortunate. Anyway, though, that's just an analogy. So this is kind of the golden formula that I've been setting us up for. Enterprise value equals the value of a business's operating assets. We established that. And, this formula, enterprise value equals equity value plus market value of debt minus cash. So from there, we can just substitute out value of business's operating assets for enterprise value because these are the same. So we have this formula. And here is this very important formula. Value of operating assets plus cash equals equity value plus market value of debt. So essentially, this is like a balance sheet for a company, but market value. I mean, we all know the balance sheet. It's assets equals liabilities plus shareholders' equity. But we're looking at the book value of assets. But this is for the market value of assets. So it's great. So let's look at some examples here. Let's say and see how these variables are affected. So we can really see the relationship between cash, debt, equity value, and enterprise value. So let's say a company uses cash to buy a $100 factory. Cash is going to go down, obviously, we're using it to buy the factory, but operating assets, this factory that will generate cash flows in the future, is going up by 100. So like always, this formula is going to balance. And our enterprise value, the value of the operating assets, is going to go up by 100. This is pretty interesting, right? Because cash, operating assets, they're all assets. So why is, substituting out cash for an asset changing the intrinsic value of the firm? Well, it's because enterprise value only relates to the future cash flows that a business produces. Just having cash on hand isn't producing any future cash flows, assuming you're not investing it. So this is why going from cash to an operating asset like a factory actually does, materially change enterprise value. It's going up by 100. Example 2, company issues $100 of new debt. So the market value of debt is going up by 100 and cash is going up by 100. This balances, but enterprise value is unchanged. And this is strange, right? But the reason is that no operating assets are being affected. This is the key point here you need to know. Enterprise value is only affected when the core business operations are affected. Moving around debt, equity, it will affect debt and equity value and cash, but it's not going to affect the overall value of the business. The overall value of the business is independent to all this financial engineering, moving around the right side of the balance sheet, debt, equity, it's independent of that. So example 3, a company's operating asset goes down by $100. Let's say a factory burns down. Operating assets goes down by 100, and similar to our flood, analogy, equity value is going to take the hit first. So equity value goes up 100. No, equity value goes down 100. That's a typo. And enterprise value goes down 100. This is all a typo. I apologize. But operating assets going down 100 means that equity value goes down 100 because they're the first one to take the hit. And as we know, operating assets equals EV. So it's going to also go down 100 because the core business activities, this factory burning down, actually does affect its value. So example 4, this is like not really realistic, but let's just say a company finds a $100 bill on the ground. Cash goes up by 100, equity value goes up 100, just like in the building analogy. If the company adds another floor, that's going to go to the equity value. But overall, this is not actually changing the value of the business. In this case, enterprise value is unchanged, which is kind of weird to think about. You're like, oh, they found cash on the ground. Why is that, not increasing? Well, I guess if we're looking at the building example here, if we say it wouldn't actually add another floor, let me think about this. The amount of floors would be the exact same. Yes, the amount of floors would be the exact same. Equity value would go up, but just thinking about this formula, yeah, operating assets doesn't go up, market value of debt doesn't go up. So this does kind of make sense. Cash going up, equity value is baked into that. So this actually will not affect operating assets. So enterprise value is unchanged. All right, so now let's look at the golden rules for this so we can summarize it and finally understand the difference between these two. So very important for enterprise value, as I said, raising debt and equity does not affect the firm's enterprise value. Cash does not affect the firm's enterprise value. Only changes in a firm's future free cash flows affects its enterprise value. And just to be clear on this second and third bullet point, by cash, I mean like cash on hand right now, not its future free cash flows. So overall, we have this formula. Enterprise value equals equity value plus debt minus cash. You might be like, Carter, it says in the formula that debt's going to affect enterprise value, cash is going to affect enterprise value. How can you make these statements that they won't? Well, it's because if cash goes up by 100, equity value is also going to go up by 100. So you're adding 100 equity value, cash is going up by 100, and you're subtracting cash. So since cash is baked into equity value, an increase in it won't actually affect enterprise value. Enterprise value is going to remain unchanged. All right, now golden rules for equity value. Raising debt and increases in cash do affect equity value. Raising debt decreases the equity holders' residual claims on a company's cash. If a company were to just raise infinite debt, then obviously equity value would be 0 because there would be no residual claims left because literally all cash would go to debt holders. This isn't realistic, but that's what would happen. Raising cash increases an equity holder's residual claim. If a business just finds $100 on the ground, while that will not affect their future free cash flows, it will affect the equity holder's residual claim. So equity value will go up by 100. And the third thing is changes in the value of operating assets does affect equity value. This is pretty obvious. The value of the future free cash flows going up does affect the equity holder's residual claim. So also, we have this formula. This is kind of just moving around the variables of equity value and enterprise value. Equity value equals enterprise value minus debt plus cash. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. Some things I didn't really get into that I should have, market value of debt and book value of debt. The market value of debt will only not be the book value of debt, except for a few minor changes due to like macroeconomic interest rates. Market value of debt will only be substantially less than the book value of debt if that hypothetical building floods so much that all equity gets wiped out, and then debt starts to get wiped out. That's the only way that can happen. But we didn't have an example where a company did so bad where the market value of debt is actually going to go down. But that's where it would happen. So maybe in a future video, I'll talk about more about the book value and market value balance sheets and what would happen if a firm went into financial distress. But I appreciate you all watching this video, and I hope you have a good day. Thank you.